Welcome back to Pistons Jack Weekly. My name is Jack, and I've got you covered with all the latest news, rumors, and results for your Detroit Pistons. If you haven't already, before we get into it, I'd be super grateful if you could like, subscribe, and drop a comment below on the video. It just helps keep the channel growing, and this season's been super fun. So keen to keep the Pistons Jack community growing. So let's get into today's episode. First of all, before we get to some news, I always like to lead these off with just doing a bit of a vibe check on the Pistons. And it's been a couple of weeks since I recorded. We've got a bit of a new format here. So, in the past week, the Pistons have only played two games, and that's mainly due or entirely due to the NBA Cup and the semifinals elimination rounds, which Pistons unfortunately weren't a part of. But the Pistons have a 1-1 record. They had a pretty sizable loss to the Celtics in Boston. And then yesterday, I'm recording this on Tuesday, the Pistons had a huge win over the Miami Heat in overtime in one of the craziest games I can recall watching as a Pistons fan in a long time, with the ebbs and flows, the swings, the highs and the lows, and then to have the Pistons ultimately win the game. It was crazy. But Detroit now are 11 and 16 and currently sit 10th in the East. And when we talk about vibes, I think the vibes, I will be honest, during that overtime period yesterday, the vibes were pretty low. The Pistons nearly blew a 20-point lead or a 19-point lead to the Miami Heat. But I think vibes are right back up there for me in terms of feeling good about this team and the direction they're heading this season. Like I mentioned, they are 11 and 16. I think they got their 11th win last season in like March or something crazy, maybe at late February. So yeah, it's getting to the point of this season now where it's probably not even worth comparing to last season, but it's just a nice reminder of how far this team has come, because this time last year, all we were focused on was firing the front office, making trades, making all kinds of huge changes to the roster and the organization. Whereas this season, we are so locked in on every single game, every single outcome. And there certainly is more of a focus on long term building for this team and trades and that kind of thing, which I'll get into in just a moment. But I think the fact we are also fixated on the fourth quarter collapses or the fourth quarter clutch play or just the actual on-court product, I think is a huge uh a positive reflection of how the season's going so far. And any fan, I still think you can say this. Not many fans would have thought the Pistons would be 11 and 16 right now. I think that win over the Miami Heat yesterday is huge. The Pistons were without Jaden Ivey, Tobias Harris, and for most of the game, Isaiah Stewart, uh, due to injury. The Miami Heat, they had all their main players: Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo. I mean, Butler in particular was a monster. Tyler Hero did his thing in the fourth quarter and nearly won them the game. And that Miami team had won four in a row with a few impressive wins. So, I think that's a huge win. That's a real landmark win on the season, as well as the Knicks win, which was now over a week ago, but that was another huge game for Kade. And ultimately, where I'll end this part of the show is like Kade Cunningham's the guy stirring the drink. He's like the leader. This team is winning because of him, and I don't want to say his shortcomings, but we are really watching, you know, this team be carried by Cade at times, and he's really led to them to important wins. Like Miami win, he's the reason they're in that game and had such a big lead. He made the go-ahead shot to put them back ahead after Tim Hardaway Jr.'s crazy 9-0 run. That New York Knicks game where they won in Madison Square Garden for the first time in like 4 or 5 years was because of Kade Cunningham's career game. And, he's had other signature wins there, triple double against the Lakers earlier in the season. So, he should be an all-star. I think I think 3 out of his past 4 games, he's set career highs for assists. He ranks third in the NBA at 9.7 a game. So to go along with 7 or 8 rebounds and 23 points. He's been incredible, and I think to see him leading this team and to leading to wins is massive, and why Vibes should be still a really good place for Pistons fans. But moving on a little bit here, uh, we're going to hit on some injury updates, some news and rumors that have been circulating in the past week. First of all, I thought huge positive piece of news for the Pistons was Bobby Clintman making his debut in the G League for the Motor City Cruise. He finished with 8 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists in 19 minutes of play. And, we saw the news, I think, the day prior that Bobby had been assigned to the G League. And I just assumed it was going to be a similar thing to what we saw, how the Pistons put Asar in the G League and just for some like kind of conditioning purposes. But he actually ended up playing. The Cruise lost by 2 points. But that game was going on at the same time as the Pistons Miami game, and Bobby, like I said, in 19 minutes, 8 points, couple of boards, couple of assists. He had 6 fouls, which I believe means you foul out in the G League. I'm not sure if there's some weird rule there where you don't, but I think I'm getting confused with the Summer League where the fouls go up to 10. But yeah, it's gonna take him a minute. But just to see him actually playing, like he had this really crazy ankle breaker and dunk. So uh, I think definitely by now, if Bobby was healthy, he would have played games with Tobias Harris missing, with some of the other injuries the Pistons have had, Asar missing so much time. So hopefully Bobby can continue to ramp up in the G League. And I think we're going to see him pretty soon on the floor for the Pistons, whether it's by the way of a blowout, loss, or win, or just due to injury. I think his services and skill set is something that can really contribute to this team this season, which is something I probably didn't expect to be saying. So I think that comes from a good place. So excited to see him out there. And then just quickly, I kind of touched on it, but Isaiah Stewart hyperextended his knee against the Heat yesterday. Looked really scary to my eye, it did look like a hyperextension, but you never know with knee injuries. It could have easily been some sort of ACL injury or tear, but luckily it's just a hyperextension. But in terms of a return, there has been no mention of that. But I would expect him to miss a few games. From memory, hyperextensions, there's a lot of bruising, and he could barely, as he was taken off the court, he couldn't really bend the knee or anything. So I think there's going to be some swelling there, and he'll probably miss a few games, if not around a week, or potentially even more. But just the fact it's not something super serious was a great outcome because the Pistons need Stu. Uh, Other two updates: Jay and Ivy was a late scratch with left knee pain against the Heat. Very late scratch, like within 10 minutes of tip off type scratch. So maybe that's why he's been struggling recently, because I've spoken about his struggles on the post game live stream. So hopefully he's back soon. Because it was so late, I feel like he won't be out for long. Like I could see him coming back tomorrow against the Jazz at home. So that seems like nothing serious. And then Tobias Harris had that thumb sprain against the Celtics earlier in the week or last week. So not sure of his timetable, but I assume it's going to be another couple of games for him based on he's got kind of a brace on his hand right now. So I would expect that to be another few games for Tobias. But in terms of trade rumors and team news, we had a fair bit going on in the past 3 days. So initially, the Pistons on Saturday, I believe, waived Paul Reed out of nowhere. We were all expecting a trade uh, because by waiving Paul Reed, it meant the Pistons had even more cap space. Uh, and we're all expecting a trade. Ultimately, though, the Pistons waived Paul Reed, signed a G League player whose name has escaped me right now, for then to waive that G League player and re-sign Paul Reed, which I'm just going to read out some notes here from Keith Smith, who's kind of the NBA Twitter cap guru, uh, and I'll just briefly summarize this, but essentially, the outcome of the Pistons waiving Paul Reed and then re-signing him whilst signing Javonte McCoy in between there from the Cruise, it basically means the Pistons obviously still retain Paul Reed, who they need right now, especially with Stu out, and who I hear that the team are actually quite high on Paul Reed. But Detroit now have opened up an extra 4 million in cap space by doing this move. And Keith says here this is a very smart uh, piece of cap management from the Pistons, which was nice to read because I was as confused as everyone else as to why the Pistons did this. So we know asset management for Detroit has been a sore spot amongst the fan base. So to see an expert like Keith saying this is a smart piece of business, I will take that and I will be happy with that. But essentially, now the Pistons, they were the only team with cap space right now in the NBA, but they now have an extra close to $4 million. So everything is kind of just pointing towards the Pistons being a salary dump destination. A lot of fans we've spoken about Zach Levine, Brandon Ingram, some of the other names on the trade market, Kyle Kuzma, and the Pistons were linked to like Nikola Vucevic, but it seems like to get one of these players is going to involve a first round pick. I was really excited a few days ago because I thought the Pistons might have been going to get Vooch because the original asking price was 2 seconds, but now we've seen some reports that Chicago now want a first, which kind of makes sense with how well Vucevic has been playing on the contract he has. So I mean, the thing is, we probably shouldn't be surprised if the Pistons don't make a major move because Trajan and every single press conference where he's been asked about the roster and moves, he's always just pointed to accumulating assets. Pistons don't have that first round draft pick that they owe. I think Portland have it now, or Minnesota. Um, if the Pistons, it's top 14 protected this season. So it will probably convey next season unless the Pistons make the playoffs, I believe. But the Pistons are asset poor because of that pick they owe. They can't trade future firsts, at least in the next few years because of that. So Trajan is just trying to accumulate assets. And I think by opening up an extra 4 million in cap space, you are now even further ahead as the main salary dumping destination in the NBA. And I'm going to record an episode tomorrow with my good friend Carl Metz, just looking at some fake trades for the Pistons, because I think there's some teams around the second apron that could either trade players to Detroit or the Pistons could be the third team in that deal to help make that deal happen salary wise because of the space they have. And obviously, by taking on bad contracts or helping facilitate that deal, that's how you get extra picks, multiple seconds, maybe a first. So the Pistons, either way, are going to be major players at the trade deadline. It just depends on, you know, I kind of don't think they're going to get a Brandon Ingram or Zach Levine, but you never know. I'm open to trades for those guys, but if I just have to put my money on it, I think the Pistons probably are that team to help facilitate a bigger deal for one of those guys, and they get back some seconds or a first. But we'll see. It's still very, very early. There's probably not going to be a lot of movement in the next few weeks, but we shall see. That there's plenty of potential for something like that to happen. But yeah, it was an interesting few days for Pistons fans, that's for sure. Uh, Closing out the show now, looking ahead, the Pistons have 3 winnable games upcoming this week. They play Utah at home tomorrow, which I think no matter if Tobias Harris or Jaden Ivey are back, I think the Pistons have to win that game. Utah have won 5 games. They are tied for the worst record in the West. It's on your home floor. You have to win that game. Just have to win that game. I don't even need to have we don't need to talk about that game anymore. So the Pistons should move to 12 and 16. Then they go on, they play 2 games of a 4 game upcoming road trip out west. First, they play in Arizona against the Suns on Saturday night, which that'll be a tough game. That's probably the toughest game of this 3 game stretch. KD's back, Booker's playing. I think Beal's out, but they got KD and Booker, 2 guys who are incredibly hard to defend and perimeter defense with Asar back is looking a little bit better, but it's going to be a challenge for Detroit. So they play the Suns in Phoenix, and then they have the Lakers at Crypto Center on Monday. You could tell me the Pistons go 3-0. You could tell me they go 1-2. I think we should expect a 2-1. I think they either win the Lakers game or the Phoenix game. I think if I had to pick one, I think they beat the Lakers at home. They haven't won a game against the Lakers at Staples, or even the Clippers, I should say, who I know have a new arena, but can't remember the last time they won in LA. It's been that long. It must have been like when those Lakers teams were rolling out like Ryan Kelly and that kind of crew in like the mid 2010s. Like it's been so long. So I think they beat the Lakers, and it's I think they go 2-1, and the vibes are back really high. Pistons are 13 and 17, and everyone's starting to feel really good about this team again. But love to know your predictions. Let me know your thoughts on what the Pistons do with all this cap space. I kind of outlined mine then. And would you like to see them make this big time trade that the fan base constantly seems to be talking about? But that's going to do it for today's show. As I mentioned off the top, if you could like, subscribe, leave a comment below, I'd really appreciate it. But if not, appreciate you for watching. And as always, go Pistons.